Well, the recent mass murders in California have reignited the topic of mental illness and violence. Rodgers' family sought help for his mental illness. They called police when they saw disturbing social media posts. But the severity of his condition seemed to go unnoticed, even from authorities. Forensic psychologist Cheryl Arrett is here now to talk a little bit more about this. Cheryl, so good to see you.
Thanks, Lynn. Good to see you, too.
You know, we just learned police officers went to Rodgers' home weeks before the planned attack. They talked to him. They didn't think he was a danger to anyone because they said he seemed calm. And as a result of it, they didn't look at those posts. They didn't even do a weapons check. I wonder whether or not authorities should bring mental health experts with them when they do these kinds of welfare checks.
I think that would be an excellent idea. There's a real problem when it comes to the confidentiality rights that the patients have on the one hand and these kinds of issues of getting them care. For example, when parents are required to get their kids treatment, the same parents who are required are also not allowed to have the information about what their kids need or if they've gone off their meds or stopped their treatment. And so the same people who are required to make sure their children get help are also not given really the authority or the information very often that they need in order to make sure that help happens. And then later on, they become the objects of blame when something really terrible happens. So we need to find a better way to communicate.
You make such a good point because these rules, these HIPAA laws are in place to protect patients, and there are some cases where it needs to be done. And then you say, I have a family member, I see signs of a mental illness, I see signs of possible violence, and I don't know what to do about it. So what's the answer? If I have that situation, if I'm that family member, what do I do?
Well, the family member can communicate with the doctor. The doctor can't communicate with the family member, and that can be very confusing for a lot of people. Do call. Get somebody to an emergency room or get somebody to have a welfare check. In this situation, even with all of the resources that this family had, Elliot really fell through the cracks here because he could handle himself, because he was socially adept enough to be able to say, oh, it's just a misunderstanding, everything's fine. And I think a lot of times the police they have so much going on that if they don't see something that's already an emergency in action, requiring violence before you do something is a problem. We need to be able to prevent the violence first. And so a family member can call. I'm sorry, a family member can call and have a welfare check done. The police have to follow through better than they did in this case, in my opinion. But getting somebody to an emergency room, getting a mental health expert, as you say, to do an expert assessment of whether somebody is at risk. But we also need to change the criteria because very often the threshold is too high to be able to really get people court order treatment, for example, when they are a danger. Unless they're in imminent danger, like they say, here I go right now, I'm going to go and kill people this moment, very often that level isn't high enough to take action at that time, and that's a problem.
And everybody seems to agree the mental health system and the way that they identify mental health issues is broken. The question is how to solve it. You make some good suggestions there. Cheryl, so good to see you. Have a good rest of your weekend.
You too, Lynn. Thanks for having me.